Ladies and gentlemen, it is pretty much complete. So today I did the swing arm stretch, the rear lift, the gear reduction, and dismounted my 30-inch Aztex off of the Can-Am wheels and put them on my ultralight whole shot ITP wheels on the 300. I think it looks pretty damn good. New swing arm bearings. This swing arm was made and the bearings were put in by Tanner Williams, dude on Facebook, highly recommended. Did a really pretty job on it. It's not like a work of art type swing arm because it's mine and I don't want that kind of crap, but it's very reasonably priced and pretty good turnaround time and looks very strong and I'm happy with it. This is the Don Augsby 350D Big Red whatever adapter kit. It's just this plate and 4 bolts. And you know I'm not a welder, but correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not going anywhere. Nice fatty bead on there, and now I'm going to trim the swing arm here and here so it fits nice around Don's bracket. So it's all put together, it's ready to go. New bearings, new U-joint. Not that it matters because this U-joint is going to be good, but so I just drop off that whole swing arm and bolt this one up. Arm is off. You take off these 2 swing arm bolts that hold the swing arm in. I use a special tool I made, which is a nut welded to a bolt. That's a 17mm Allen. That's a 24. Boom, gets it out real easy with the impact. These are in really good shape. Sometimes they're rusty and you got to use heat and stuff. So there's the stock swing arm weak 300 rear end assembly, which is kind of sad because my brakes work on it. And here's the 350D stretched 2 5/8 that's going on there. Paint's still drying. But I'll give you one more little update. So after putting the 2 drive shafts on the bench, there's a stock 300, obviously the short one, and there's a 88 300 front shaft. And measuring them, everyone says the difference is 2 1/4. That's not 100% true because the U-joint sits all the way against the flange on the factory one. On the front drive shaft swap one, it sits against this front flange. So you really got to measure from this flange to the end of the splines. And if you do that, you can see that it's about 2 3/8. 2 3/8 inch longer. Now I did a 2 5/8 inch stretch, right? So you see I'm a 1/4 inch, 2/8, a 1/4 inch longer than I should be on my stretch. So I was thinking about adding two spacers, which would be about a little less than a 1/4 inch thickness. But after measuring everything and looking how far the splines extend in the back compared to the factory one, I've decided to just use 1 washer to get a little more splines in the U-joint. And this is actually a slip joint here, right? So there's some extra splines there, just where arm goes up and down, that slides in and out. That's why you have springs in there. So making use of that slip joint a little bit, and yeah, all that. So you see how this is a nice long travel, this is a little shorter travel. But making use of all that, I think I'm gonna use 1 washer. My factory U-joint is actually in better shape than the new one I had. And I'm putting it back in because it's just so cherry. However, putting it together just like that, and with 1 washer, and I think it'll be perfect. Yes, I could have had the stretch made 2 3/8 inches long to keep it all factory, but I got another 1/4 inch of stretch, and all I had to do was add a washer here. So I think it's worth it. But when you're gonna do the stretch, the proper thing to do would probably be a 2 1/2 inch stretch, then you don't have to worry about the washer. So the swing arm stretch is done. As you can see, there's a ton of space around the stock tire because it's stretched and lifted now. I'm about to do the gear reduction, which on this bike's pretty sweet. No front diff to pull, just pull the cover off. I've done plenty of videos on it, so I will not do a full walkthrough, but I'll give you some tips and tricks. I like to jack the bike up like this, get it about 30 degrees sideways, helps everything fall in there and helps everything line up better. You don't have to do that, it's just something I do. I obviously drain the oil out of it first before you do that. On the shock mount, I went with a real temporary setup because I'm eventually going to do a 300EX shock and a paddle, but I wanted it to ride real nice right now, so I just threw a piece of flat bar or rectangular tube I had laying around, welded it here to the support, and welded my tabs there and set it at 2.5 inches of lift. As you can see, that's the angle at full down travel, not a bad angle at all. Make sure before you weld it, obviously you spin it over, make sure the U-joints aren't binding or touching or anything like that. I could have gone a little higher, but it looks perfect with the 3-inch front lift or 2 1/2 inch front lift with the Rancher 420 shocks. So that's all done. Swing arm is not perfectly straight. These 4 holes right here were clocked probably 3 degrees, so I got them all the way. Basically, this rack is a little too low, right? Because the axle's tilted this way some. So I got those bolts all the way on this side. I wallered these out to allow it to get a little closer to try to line the back axle. But if you put a level gauge on the axle tube and on the frame up there, and so I use that spot on the swing arm, you can see that there's a 3-degree difference. So by messing with it, I got it to about a 1.5-degree difference now, which is almost tolerable, but not really for me. So I'm eventually gonna have to drill those 4 holes out bigger to let me clock the diff more. Drill these 4 holes out bigger to let me clock it like that just a little bit. Or I may just re-weld this when I take it all apart to do the axle paddle. But for now, it's fine. It's barely noticeable, but I do notice those sort of things. Also, because it's a different axle, the axle doesn't sit perfectly under the bike. So if you look at this side, you'll see that the tire's pretty far in. And if you look at this side, you'll see that the tire's a little farther out. It's close to perfectly centered, but not exactly. All right, so if you need more in-depth explanation, I have it in another video, but there's just a little bit of grinding to do on the 300 with a 54%. Another reason 54% is nice, doesn't require a ton of grinding. So you can see that basket's on there, it spins fine. You have to clearance this kickstart bracket. You have to grind the bracket itself. You replace the 10mm with an 8mm and grind the bolt just a little bit. And you have to grind off the outside of the bell on the shift drum. That's what hits the lights. So that's why you have to do a start and gear mod on here, right? Because it's not gonna know what gear it's in anymore. It's not gonna know if it's neutral or reverse, basically. But you can do all the grinding outside the bike. With all the new gear reductions, you don't have to grind any of the aluminum inside the case. So very easy grinding. You can just grind the bolt on the bench grinder, the bracket, and that on the bench grinder or cutoff wheel, however you wanna do it. But easy install, and like I said, the way I always do is I put the oil pump on, and then I put the gear on, and it'll just barely kiss it, and you can slide the gear past the oil pump with a little tap tap. My gasket didn't tear, which is excellent, so I don't have to bother scraping that. Just gotta put a little ultra gray on that side and jam it together, good to go. You can install these in about an hour if you know what you're doing. Another couple quick tips and tricks. So I get a lot of questions about, hey, I did my 300 reduction and the cover won't go on. So this is how everything should look. You line up that little dot down there with that little arrow on the case. Kickstarter, you have to put the foot shifter on there, preload that spring, it's gotta be up around there. This washer must be here, this washer must be here, and this washer must be here. Pretty simple, people screw it up all the time. When you put the cover on there, this is spring loaded, right? So this has some spring force on it. That's gonna try to fight you. So you gotta overcome that spring and line the rest of this shit up. Put a little bit of grease on the 3 triangle ball thing to hold it in place. I've got the bike tilted on its side some, so not a big deal. But this reverse thing has to be on this side, lined up like that, unless you're deleting it, which is dumb. And there should be nothing in this case except for that. And now you're ready to stick it on there. It's pretty simple, but I don't know, people have a hard time with it. One thing you need to know is I'm running a 3-inch wheel spacer on this side. And by a 3-inch, I mean a 2-inch and a 1-inch. And I'm just running a 2-inch wheel spacer on this side. And that gets it pretty centered. And that's because this is an axle swap off a different machine. So you got to expect stuff like that. But yeah, that's what it took to get it. It was pretty centered. It was a 3-inch on one side and a 2-inch on the other side. But these wheels, which are 4+3, no spacers in the front. Front sits pretty good. I haven't had to do any bending of any of the front brackets or anything yet. I'm gonna ride it around, maybe under some flexing. I'm gonna have some rubbing on this right here, but it's easy to just bend that back. But I'm not gonna do anything unless I have to, obviously. But it looks super clean. I think these wheels look really good on the green machine. Got stealth snorkel, airbox is jammed up. Yeah, man, it's ready to go. So hopefully we'll have it out this weekend. Like I said earlier, the only thing I haven't done yet is the axle paddle. I'm gonna wait until get everything else working good. And then I'm gonna add that extra amount of abuse because axle paddles are kind of brutal. But it's gonna ride really nice the way it is now with the stock shock and where I positioned it. You know, pretty much factory travel, even with the stretch. I kicked the shock back a little bit to add a tad bit more stiffness because the front's a little stiffer for the 420 shocks and I wanted to match that. But it sits a little, maybe just a hair high in the back right now. When I sit on the bike, it's perfectly level. So really excited about it. I think it came out great. And it does have the torque locker in the front. So pretty good build. Knocked it out quick.